Hey, 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 good people. It is after 7 o'clock on Wednesday. I know I'm running a little bit late. My schedule has completely changed, as I mentioned a couple of weeks ago. And so I get on here as quickly as I can. And also, I am coming on every other week, just temporarily. But I am here today, and we are going to continue with blog 54 and move straight into blog 55, which is an exciting one. Um, hey, I miss talking to you guys. I am available. I just have so much going on that just for a couple of weeks, I absolutely cannot do this podcast every week. So we'll go back to weekly podcast probably around Christmas. So I just need a couple months and we'll go back. I have been doing some pretty exciting things. For those of you who do not know who I am or you are just joining me, I'm Dr. Lisa. I am the host of this podcast, Happy Hour with Dr. Lisa. And this is my podcast. And I also have a blog that can be found at lisaliggins.chambers. I said that all wrong, didn't I? Live show, lisaliggins.chambers.com. That is my website. If you want to take a look at the blogs as I go through them, you could do so by scrolling all the way down to blog 54 at the bottom, and then we're going to go up a bit to blog 55. I am actually on blog 72 this week, so I am far away now from blog 54 and 55. So I have stories. I keep writing them until I can't write any more stories because they're all true stories, each and every one of them. And so when I am done with them, I'm done with them. I'm not going to make them up for you. So there you go. I want you to know that you can reach me at my phone number, which is 765-205-1959. And then you can also reach me via email, which some of you do. I just realized some of your emails are going to my spam. So I am checking through those every day now. My email address is kidscanseeghosts@gmail.com. I have some exciting news. It's pretty exciting. There are a couple of things happening to me that are very exciting, but this one pertains to parents. So lately, I have been writing different journals and getting them prepared to share with parents publicly. And one of the ways that I started doing that is I released one recently and it is live now on Amazon. It's released as a hardcover book and also as a Kindle book. It is a journal and it's geared toward parents, and we needed it. Those parents that have more difficult children, meaning those kids that parents are fighting for to get services for special education because they have behavior concerns, this journal is for you. What I was thinking about prior to writing it is that there are some gaps that need to be filled for parents. I have watched enough parents over the past year get so upset and so frustrated because not only did they feel like no one was listening to them, but they didn't understand, for example, the special education process. In the case of the journal that I just released, it is called It's About Time for Parenting Journal. And it is because this is me showing parents how to record their own data for their children who have behavior concerns. And then when they have that data, they can take that data to their special education teams or their psychologists or their psychiatrists or whatever provider needs to see some data. Because what parents fail to do sometimes is to be historians. And it is completely normal because parents have so much going on. But then when you add a kid that has behavior concerns who's acting up all the time, then of course they're going to have trouble recording some of the history that we need in order to diagnose properly or to, figure out the function of certain behaviors. And the other thing that we need is that historical reference to writing reports. And I can go on and on and on as to the reason why, we need this kind of history when you guys come to see us to help your kids. And when we are constantly asking these questions of parents and they don't remember, it's not because there's something wrong with their memory. It's just because they're just too mentally busy and they're stressed out and they're crying and, upset. And dads are crying too sometimes because they just don't know what to do to answer our questions. So I made it very simple for you. The journal that I wrote is going to teach you how to track the data that you have at home for your children. So, what it does is it breaks down a couple of different areas for you in the journal. When you start recording these things in your journal, you're going to learn for yourself how to figure out different patterns of behavior that's happening at home from your kids. So, for example, if your kids start misbehaving, we need to know what happens right before the actual behavior occurs. Once you start tracking these things, that's the same thing that we do in the schools, behaviors. We track behaviors. So I'm teaching parents how to do that in this journal. So I like it. I thought about it, wrote it up, organized it, and now I'm giving that knowledge to all of you as parents to help you. So the beauty in this journal too is that once you start tracking these things, you can continue to track them because I've given you plenty of pages to do it. And you can correlate with teachers. You can compare data to see how they're doing before, for example, special education, and then after interventions and or special education services. So now you'll be able to see yourself if there are improvements are working from their IEPs based upon the data that you have. And it's a real simple journal, and I've outlined it for you based upon the ABC model of functional behaviors, which was created by Ellis in 1957, and we've changed it and modified it over the years. Of course, 1957 was a long time, but it is what I've been trained to do. And it is exactly what we do to find out, again, the function of a child's behavior. So I'm giving that knowledge to all of you parents. Buy one of those. The link is on my website under parenting journals. I have another journal that's going to come out. So I'm trying to fill in these gaps for you guys. The next journal is all about special education. I am giving you the tools to use and the notebook when you go to these special education meetings. Woohoo! My parents are so lost in those meetings, but not anymore. So I need about another week and I'll be ready to release that one. And then my goal is to have two more done, I think, in November. One is going to target teenagers, and the other one is going to be about grief, I believe. So the special education one is next. So all of these are going to be released on Amazon. So I'm keeping it simple. This is not rocket science. It helps you, and then it helps us to help your kids and you. Okay, so tell your friends all about it if they need it, and it is available now. All right, let's go right into Blog 54. Let's finish it up. The last thing I want to say about Blog 54 is that from this learning that I did with, learning demon names, I did go and buy the book, and I think I mentioned this book before, called The Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis. And I highly recommend you read that book if you want to have some understanding of some of the things that I mentioned in Blog 54. Ironically, the pastor that actually talked to me about that book told me to be careful because keep reading the book. It's going to make, he said, Satan is going to make you go to sleep. Not going to want you to read this book. I said, oh, that's not going to happen. I'm going to read the book, blah, 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 blah. No, because they don't want you to understand these things. You're going to fall asleep. I'm like, oh, I'm not going to fall asleep. I'm not going to fall asleep. Guess what happened? Fell asleep. Each time I tried to read it, I fell asleep. And I was like, okay, is this psychosomatic, like all in my head? Or is this truly happening and it has like some type of biblical basis? I don't know. I don't think the pastor would lie to me. So maybe he was right. But I want to share that with you. And then when you all read the book, or if you decide to get it, I want you to tell me if that happened to you. So moving on to blog 55. I have got to set you guys up for blog 55. This was a bizarre situation. Now, I try to keep it 100 with all of you, and I'm going to tell you it was bizarre. And you don't ever hear me say bizarre. I don't think I've ever used bizarre in my podcast. But this was bizarre. And I'll tell you why. In my brain, I kept thinking child M could hear voices, right? Okay. And I said, I think child M can hear voices. So I said aloud, are you hearing voices? And child M said, got quiet, looked around, and said, one. And so I said, oh, okay. I didn't believe that this child only saw one or heard one voice. I just didn't. Something within me just didn't believe it. So what I decided to do was, I knew this kid was hearing something, but I didn't think it was just one voice. Just don't ask me why. I don't know. There was just some really weird things happening. So when you work with nebulous kids for so long, I call these babies nebulous children. When you work with them for so long, you start seeing different signs. So these weren't signs that I would typically see. Okay, so I am live on Instagram, on both of my Instagram pages. So if you want to see my facial expressions, I'm going to try to do something similar. All right, so I'm looking straight now, and I'm observing the kid, and the kid was there, and when I would talk, there was different gestures, if you will, and the gestures to any psychologist would make them suspicious that this kid could see voices or hear voices because there was a long pause, there was looking at different things, there was the silence I've seen this before a long time ago in a kid, and the silence always signified that they're listening to something. And so that's what alerted me to, okay, this baby is hearing voices. I wonder what's going on with this, hearing of the voices. And so over a couple of weeks, I began to realize that child M had some pretty serious psychotic symptoms, which you also have not heard me talk about in children, and it's because I don't see it too often. This is probably the first time, years. So, based upon just that conversation there, I called the parent and suggested, intensive psychotherapy. Parent refused. It's always baffling to me when parents refuse treatment. There was a longer story to why this parent refused treatment, but I can't say because that's just revealing too much information. But Treatment was refused. So I'm seeing this kid, seeing this kid, seeing this kid. And I was not this kid's psychologist. So I'm seeing this kid. And I'm like, okay, I have got to convince this parent that this child needs mental health treatment. Because here's the other thing. The behaviors were so odd that I thought this child had a speech impairment. It was a, gosh, I can't even explain to you. It's like this strange speech pattern. And I thought, okay, this is a part of the psychosis that this child has. And so I was actually to the point where I said, okay, I'm going to have to make a state call here because this kid needs some help. And if this parent continues to resist, I'm going to call it neglect because this has gotten overboard and this kid needed some help. Okay, so this is a kid who performed well in school, was very respectful, no behavior concerns, just hallucinating, right? And so I can be skeptical about things just like all of you. And I had entertained whether or not this kid actually saw ghosts, but these behaviors were different. This was totally different than seeing ghosts. This was more psychotic. So, because I had to go back and forth, because I was like, okay, I've seen kids listen to ghosts, but it's different, right? They listen to them, they talk, they have what we call in society normal behaviors with seeing ghosts, if that makes sense. Sorry, I have a cat. Stop it. Who will not leave me alone. Sorry. So kids who can see ghosts, a lot of them behave just fine. They are being tormented sometimes, which makes anxiety and, sadness come into play till you give them some tools to equip themselves to deal with it, right? This was totally different. Giving me this was giving me more schizophrenic vibes, people. This was different. And so what I did was I had to put my mental health hat on. It's off sometimes because we can all get relaxed. But when I do detect that there's something more going on with bizarre behaviors, just different, I threw that mental health hat on and said, okay, now I got to figure out what the catalyst is for this behavior. Now I have to get this mother on board to get some psychiatric treatment, possibly hospitalization. Now I have to threaten, if you will, that if you don't, then we need to call the state because this is going to be deemed neglect. Because I'm telling you, your kid has some serious psychotic behaviors here. Finally, just to make that part short, I did convince the mother to get treatment. So that was good because I had to share with the mom, my thoughts about calling the state. And I hate that. I hate calling the state on parents, but sometimes we don't have a choice, and we have to do it. But what I like to do is I like to have a conversation with parents first before I make that decision. So she and I had a conversation and we came to the same conclusion that yes, it's time to get some treatment. Mom noticed these behaviors as well. And so back to child M. When we were talking a little deeper about what was going on, I directly asked this child, are you seeing anything? Are you seeing ghosts? I know you said you hear them, different things, you hear voices, but are you actually seeing something? Do you see ghosts? So hold that thought. Let's talk about these hallucinations, okay? Child M repeated what Child M heard in every sentence. So something says something to Child M repeated it back to me. Now, I have seen that kind of behavior before, um, in a psychosis when, people hallucinate. I've seen that in hospitals before, right? So that's what this kid was doing. And so finally, um, it was obvious to me that this kid wasn't using his or her own thinking, right? It was, I asked a question, there was a pause, there was the eyes, like, what should I say? And then it was the repeating of the phrases that something, has said to this kid. And I go into detail about that a little bit more on the blog. And so I said to myself, this kid is communicating with the auditory hallucinations in his or her head. So finally, just to make a long story short about this part, I said, who are you talking to? Are you talking to something, or is something talking to you? And this kid said, yes, yes, yes. And I said, well, who are you talking to? And listen, I don't, let me see, it has been decades, decades since I've encountered someone who may have what we used to call multiple personality disorder, right? Years I've encountered two people in my entire career with what we call now as dissociative identity disorder, or DID. We used to call it multiple personality disorder. Just two, and my career spans over 20 years now. Most people never see individuals like this ever in their entire career because it's extremely rare. Um, there was more than one person. Yep, talking to this child. And I thought to myself, oh boy, this is a little bit deeper than I thought it was going to be, right? And here's what got me. One of the voices was more commanding than the others, which is something we look for, and protected Child M from the other persons, or in her head, his or her head. So I thought, yeah, okay, we have to get this kid some help. I don't deal with DID. There are plenty of professionals. I don't know of any, honestly, but there are people out there who specialize in dissociative identity disorder, and this type of child needed that kind of specialist, which is something that I don't do. I don't have experience with that, haven't been trained in it, but I do recognize it, and that's where, your clinical skills come into play, and experiences, but also that handy dandy DSM-5, and consulting with others if you need to. So I actually didn't have to consult because I knew that someone else was going to actually help this child. Now, here's the thing. Sorry, I'm so tired. It's late. Child, yeah, you get old when you start saying it's late. It's what, 7? I don't know, 7:30, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so tired. Mama's getting old. Um, oh, my coworkers told me to stop saying that today. So if they're listening, okay, I'll stop saying I'm getting old. But they're all like 27 and 28, and they told me to cut it out. Go figure that one out. Anyway, um, so I had to ask about the visual. So let's go back to the visual. Because for me, you know, I wasn't sure if this, with regard to the visual component, I wasn't sure if um, child M actually could see ghosts or if these were actually visual hallucinations. Because for me, having this experience, I I know the difference. And so my thought was child M was a kid who actually had visual and auditory hallucinations. There were no tactile hallucinations, no olfactory. Olfactory is rare. Typically, there's something else wrong organically with someone if they have olfactory or smell hallucinations, and they need to see a physician for that. Um, so, as I was questioning whether or not Child M could tell me more about the visual hallucinations, the voice in Child M's head chimed in and wanted to talk to me. The main one wanted to talk to me. And I said, okay, let's talk. The main one wanted to talk to me just to tell me that it thought I was smart. And I was like, geez, I don't know if I should be flattered or not. And I said, well, I really appreciate that. Thank you. And I said, but you're not helping Child M. You're not supposed to be in Child M's head. And I'm going to make sure we work hard so that you will go away and leave Child M alone. So I didn't feed into that at all, except to say thank you. And I said, what is the voice? I knew the name of the personality, but I can't say it to you all. And so I said, what is that voice doing now? And this child said, it's quiet. I said, mm-hmm. That's because I said we're going to do something about this. Because I don't want this child going through life not being able to cope with, the more severe or active or negative symptoms that were going on. And voices are active symptoms. If this child had schizophrenia, for example, the hallucinations that were currently being experienced were active. And so that's what we call it. And when this one was quiet, there was another one. I don't even know if I wrote this in the blog because I just remembered it. But there was another voice who was actually the more aggressive one. And when this main one calmed down, the more aggressive one would come out until the main one calmed it down. There was a lot of action with these hallucinations. And once I was able to get the parent on board, we were golden. We were good to go. Because sometimes the stigma of mental health reigns supreme, right? People, especially in the Black community, do not want to go to therapy. They don't want their kids to go to therapy. Um, and they'll say one or two things. One, I'm going to pray about it. And two, I don't believe in disclosing my business. And sometimes we raise kids in the Black culture to think the same way. So this was also a family that had their own biases about mental health. Now I'm sitting here looking at this kid with active hallucinations visually and auditorily, yet I'm on the phone with parents who are like, no, just send them home. And no, I don't want my kids stigmatized. And no, 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 no. And I'm like, what the heck about this conversation do you don't get? And that's kind of how I phrased it. Because sometimes you just have to be real solid with people like that, and that's okay. And if you don't do it that way, sometimes they don't take you seriously, and sometimes you have to be that way because if you are adamant about how you feel about your client. And I was adamant. This person was sitting here with active hallucinations. You're not going to tell me too many times that this is not a kid that's not going to get help. No, this kid is going to get help. I can't make you take that, but I'm going to push you hard because it is going to be medical neglect because this kid is suffering. There were so many other signs like isolation and in the corners talking to him or herself, or in the corners talking to something. Okay. So there were more symptoms than just the hallucination. So I was getting kind of irritated because, in the Black community, it's the other thing is we're going to pray about it. I get that. I talk about God on it all the time on this podcast. Pray about it. But at the same time, God didn't say be a dummy. Don't let your kids suffer, right? He put the education within a lot of us to help, right? Mental health is no different than physical. Why? Because they intertwine. And if your kid has a broken arm, are you going to sit there and go, well, we're going to pray about the broken arm? And we're just going to let it stay broken? Or are we going to pray on the way to the hospital to get the doctors to wrap it up? It's the same mentality you have to have with mental health. And that's the position that I came or called when I said that's the position I took when I called the mother. There, you're just going to what? Fix this at home? Heck, I can't even fix this. And I got a doctorate in psychology. This takes a specialist, right? And so we need to remove biases in order to get help. It is why people remain traumatized. It is why what? Heart attacks, heart disease, number one killer of Black women. Take care of yourselves. That includes your mental health. Finally, I was able to get the mom on board, like I said. Finally, there were other interventions put in place to help this child in various places, where this child would go. So once we had these interventions in place, let's talk about, if this kid actually saw ghosts or not. Once this kid started getting treatment, I'll have to tell you all, yes, absolutely. I see one of my oldest friends on Instagram. I got to wave. Hi. Thanks for joining me. I had to pause and say hello because this is someone I've known since I was 5 years old, 45 years of my life. I just told our ages publicly. All right. So, yes, 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 yes. Once some of the symptoms started to go or get back to baseline for child M, yes. When I finally talked to child M after continuously in treatment, but medication to calm the hallucinations, yes, child M started to talk to me quite a bit about the ability to see ghosts. Child M bothered me a lot and told me that sometimes the pauses weren't just the auditory hallucinations. Sometimes it was seeing ghosts, which child M saw his or her entire life since being a little kid, but everything is out of control. And child M was confused, trying to, I guess, decipher whether or not the voices in child M's head had to do with seeing ghosts. So this is probably one of the trickiest ones because it wasn't clear. So here you have psychosis, but you also have a possible, and I'm not going to say for sure, I'm going to say possible kid who can see ghosts. It was hard to tell because I was not in, doing therapy with this kid. I don't do therapy anymore. But just in interacting and knowing the things that I do about mental health, but also, kids that can see ghosts, trying to figure out whether these hallucinations were actually ghosts or a part of this kid's psychotic behavior. That was really difficult. But according to this kid, all three can occur at once. So, according to the kid, not me. So, apparently, that's probably what was happening because I'm almost positive that this is a kid who did not have hallucinations visually or auditorily as a child, but can clearly remember seeing ghosts. Now, I don't know if that was maybe some psychosis happening back when this kid was little, who knows? But as far as when I met Child M, Child M could actually claim to see ghosts, but also had hallucinations. So it was really hard. So sometimes it's not as clear cut as it typically is. Sometimes it can get pretty challenging. Psychotic behaviors are hard for me because I don't specialize in them. I don't see schizophrenia, schizophreniform, schizoaffective disorder. I don't treat those things, never have. So child M was a little bit challenging for me. But listen, when you do see signs in kids or adults that have some things that are different or weird or odd to you, it's okay to call them odd, because I do, and see what you can do to try to help that person. So that is blog 55. That is Child M. I have been writing quite a bit about grief lately. That is not until you get to, blog 71 maybe. But this next one, I think when I was writing the blogs in the 50s, I was feeling some kind of way about how Black women were being treated in the media. So by the time I got to blog 56, I think I kind of blew it away there and got it out. Different assumptions, because I've been through those things quite a bit where people make assumptions just due to race about me. So I think I was watching some stuff politically and just start banging on my keyboard for blog 56. So sometimes I'll go off on a tangent from kids who could see ghosts because there's so much happening and so many people ask questions. And I think at that time, when I wrote blog 56, there was a lot going on in April of 2022. I'll let you guys read about it. But at the same time, um, it really does impact the mental health of all of us, but in particular, Black women. And so I watched some things that were happening, and we'll talk about them in 2 weeks, to a Black woman on a platform. And it was really upsetting to watch it happen. And ironically, something happened to me today because that kind of correlates with this. I'll tell you guys when I have my next blog, but it was about Kajani Brown Jackson, that next blog, because the pain that she felt is the same pain that a lot of Black women feel. Today, it almost happened to me, but I always get the last word now because I don't care too much about what I say when people do ignorant behaviors like this toward me. So we'll talk about it, and then we'll get into, after that blog. I'm not going to talk about that blog too long, just kind of sum it up. But then I'm going to go straight into probably blog 57, where I'm going to introduce a new child to you, and it's Child N. So we're getting up the alphabet. Now I am on child. I don't know where I am. I'm way up to R, I think. So keep up, keep up. We'll keep talking about it. As long as I keep seeing kids and families who, I'm having a hot flash. As long as I can see kids and families who, you know, who claim they have the ability to see ghosts or they can see ghosts, I'll keep talking about it because it does keep happening to me. Also, there's some questions that came in on some of my websites. So I might post that in the blog as well, just to make sure I'm answering your questions. So keep them coming. I am done. So that is the end of the blog. I will see you all in 2 weeks. Until then, have a very, very good rest of the week. And thanks for joining me. Bye-bye.